Nothing in this podcast is a recommendation. Welcome, everybody. Season 2 of the podcast. We're here with Alison Cebula. So grateful to have you back. Wow, it's been some time. We've had one catch up in between. We should never go that long without communicating. I love you and you're so fun.
Thank you.
So what's been going on? Give us the update.
Yeah, Mel, thank you so much for having me back. It's great. It's great to be back. It's been years. And it feels like a lifetime actually, because I think that was during the pandemic, like early pandemic.
It was early because I'm alone and I need my friends and they're all over the world. So let's just do a podcast. At least I know 40 of them will talk to me for at least 1 hour. We had a women's group that we met on.
That's right.
And we
that was great. I love that.
We're still kind of trying to do that. There is still a little Howl and Heal vibe with the podcast, but we're really geared this season more towards this company I'm building, Decision Society, which is supporting female founders. And also with this topic of spiritual equity, how are we spiritually invested in our companies? Maybe we don't have access to all the financial capital in the world, but what's that spiritual capital that's motivating us and moving us? So those are the topics for the conversation this year. But I have to say, out of all the episodes I recorded in COVID, yours was the most impactful because understanding my ACEs set me off into this direction where I'm like, absolutely not. My life expectancy is not going to be 20 years less than everyone who has less than me. But I couldn't see myself getting old. I'm like, I guess I got some work to do. But we're at basically 4 years after that realization, maybe even longer now. And I just want to thank you. The last time we caught up, I loved seeing what you're building and doing now.
Thank you.
I highly recommend, if you haven't listened to Alison's first podcast episode, that you go back and listen to it first, because what you're going to layer on today, what you taught me when we spoke for a catch up for this podcast, it really layers in beautifully after you've done that ACEs work, which is adverse childhood experiences. Once you recognize the childhood experiences you've had and the issues they might be causing in your life, I feel like this is that second ring on the ladder of that you have to do.
Yeah. So at the time I had changed my career. Once I learned what adverse childhood experiences were, which go back and listen to the first episode, but essentially when stressful things happen in our childhood, they impact our health throughout our adulthood, including like what you were referencing. If you have 6 or more really significant traumatic childhood experiences that could include experiencing physical abuse or neglect or a parent in prison or domestic violence, if you have 6 out of 10 or more of those, your life expectancy when you're looking at population level data can go down by 20 years. So they're really significant. And
it should be a public service announcement.
Yes.
The thing for me that was crazy was I was a 6, but I also had 2 experiences that weren't listed there that were severely traumatic with bullying and being beaten up by a group of girls and all this crazy stuff that also happened on top of the things that were going on in my household. So I was like, whoa, I had told a boyfriend, I can't see myself getting old. And he used it against me and weaponized it because, of course, I was attracting bad guys at that point.
Yeah.
But it really empowered me to get a grip. Some of these behavioral health issues are because I shouldn't have gone through some of the things that I've gone through. And it's not my fault, but it was my responsibility to figure it out.
And I really see women doing this. Every woman that I know, as soon as they find out about ACEs, they are going to therapy. They are going to support groups. They are joining the women's circles. They are listening to podcasts. They are doing the work. I am not seeing that from men. In general, in broad strokes. Of course, there's, not all men, but I just want to point that out, because I feel a lot of grief about that.
I think that men are just trained to go to work and pay for stuff and don't spiritually invest in what happened to you because it's not that important. And it is. It's the most important thing. I dated a guy who I know had no ACEs and he was literally Satan. So
he probably did. No, I mean, let's unpack that a little bit because that goes right in line with. So you and I were talking about internal family systems, which is
a new thing, everybody. So
this is the new modality that I found myself an internal family systems therapist in 2023 in Boston. And it just changed my life. I was saying, I feel sane for the first time. And a friend of mine was like, maybe don't say you feel sane so that like when you do something insane, you don't have to walk that back. Um, but internal family systems is a therapy modality that was founded by Richard Schwartz. And it really feels like a lot of other modalities. And he says that he's been inspired by a lot of things. It's looking at all the different facets of our personality or our reactions, our traumas, our different ways of thinking about and seeing things as parts. And the book that probably everyone should get is called No Bad Parts. And it's like looking at these different things that come up as either protectors, things that are trying to shield our exiles, they call them, like the really, really soft wounded child parts. And then we have firefighters that are just trying to put out fires as fast as possible. And so when it comes to what's happening with men, I think is their protector parts are really, really, really strong. So I've had a few experiences over the last few years where I have started to get to know a man dating. And then I realized that the reason he hasn't been doing his inner work, I mean, his narrative is like, oh, I don't have any aces. Oh, I'm fine. Oh, I'm great. I had a great childhood. That's his narrative.
Right.
But that narrative is a protector. That narrative of I had a great childhood is protecting him from looking at his inner wounded child. And when you look at how we raise boys in our society, in our culture, it really is like you're not allowed to feel anything. You're not allowed to be soft. You're not allowed to like enjoy beautiful, soft things. You're not allowed to feel emotions or feel in a soft way about the world. And I've worked with children for most of my life, starting even in high school, all the way up until my mid 20s. And I could see the difference in how we raise girls and boys. And so the thing is, like, these exiled parts, the wounded parts, or the parts that feel like they want to show up in the world with this really nice feeling, soft hearted energy, are way in there. And there's a lot of shame about letting those parts out.
I agree. I also think sometimes people are just like, okay, I want to say that I want to say I want to say it's not true, but like I met this guy's mom
Yeah,
and dad. They had been together forever. They were like refugees. I mean, this guy like probably inherited some of his stuff from his
for
lineage or
sure.
something. But she said, "Oh, he was so cute when he was a baby. We would call him Doodle Tala." And I'm like, "What's that?" And she's like, "It means golden penis." And I said, "What do you call the girls?" She goes, "Oh, nothing." I said, "Oh, so this is cultural. He just thinks that he has a golden dick and can
That's
do what he
hilarious.
wants." So I do think
So that's
subliminal.
there too. That's there
So
too.
he was
Yeah.
like brainwashed the other right way. But I once heard this thing. Somebody said, we're all just trying to figure out why we had it so good or so bad, you know? So maybe
Mm,
there's that. I do think though in the world, and I'm surrounded in my family by very stable, healthy adults who have successful jobs and successful families. Okay. I'm the magical goat of my family. We no longer call it the black sheep.
yeah.
But I'm the only one not married, all the cousins. But what I realized is that I went through trauma with my parents young, and there were things going on in the family that none of them had to go through. And so when I
Mhm.
see them high functioning, their kids are in their 20s now. One's a rocket scientist. I mean, they're like amazing. My mom's side of the family is so amazing, right? I see that having two loving parents that love you and that love each other growing up, just that basic statistic right there, okay? That is like having gold. That's like
Yes.
entering the world so far ahead of everyone else because
Yeah.
you don't have to deal with those big issues, right? Then you go to my dad's side of the family. I have one living cousin left. The other ones have died. One just died in jail. So you're like,
Yeah.
okay, it goes to show when the family systems are healthy, you don't have to do all this shadow work and work through it, but you have to work through other things, right? Maybe a
Right.
shallowness or a not empathizing with people. I don't know what people who had it too good are working through. I'm not one of them.
So, yeah, I just finished a book that was exploring this theme really beautifully. It's a fiction book, like a murder type mystery
Ooh,
book by Tana French, who I think is the best detective writer because she really understands people and human nature and really gives everyone like a complete background story.
oh, I love.
So, there's really no one like her. But this book is called The Witch Elm. And I read an interview after I finished it. I was like, what the heck just happened to me? She said she was exploring the theme of someone growing up with a lot of luck and how that might make it so they don't develop empathy. because this main character is like very privileged and everyone tells him like, oh, everything always goes right for you. And then it kind of then leads for some character exploration. I won't give anything away, where you're like, oh, actually, like he's like not able to put himself into other people's shoes or like care about other people. And the stuff that he does is
That
like
is
really
crazy.
subtle but destructive. Yeah.
That is exactly this person. You couldn't have
Okay.
defined it better. So,
Oh, okay.
but with that being said, I think that in our relationships are actually a great place to do shadow work. I read a book called Romancing the Shadow, and it really helped me understand something in talking about family. And I want to go back to this new concept that we're introducing here today. But in that book, there's something called emotional incest that
Mm-hmm.
parents can do with their families. Very often it's mothers with their daughters because they don't get to fulfill and live their life the way that they wanted to because they had children. They basically emotionally attach to you, and
Yep.
then they take your life in many ways. And so that comes out in relationships in very weird ways. Anyways, it's a pair of Jungian analysts, Connie Zweig and her partner. They wrote that book. That book was incredible about shadow and relationships. But internal family systems, like the actual voices in your head that you think are yours, but they're actually being narrated from people who trained, conditioned you, whether they were willing to or not, like whether they intended to or not. That's how you process information and react to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of the time you do want to get in there and dig around and say, well, who gave you that thinking? And I think that can be helpful. I always felt like my parents expected me to do great things. So I have a part that feels like that expectation is there. And then in other areas, it may just be that your personality formed in a couple different ways. I might say something like, I have a part that strives to do well, and that I have another part that seems to be more destructive, addictive, and sabotaging. And so it's a way, it's like a language so that all the parts get to be there. And of course, then we can dig in and say, oh, okay, so the part that wants to strive to do well, there is a little bit of expectation for my parents that creates like a negative thing. But then
Mm.
there's this other part of that, like behind that, that feels a great pride and identity by achieving, interesting things or working hard. So there's positives and negatives. When it comes to the sabotaging side, I always had this idea in my head that there were like two of me. I like the parts where, because then it's sort of like, well, there's actually like infinite use. I always kind of thought there was like this part of me that got into like UC Berkeley as an undergrad student and like got straight A's. And I remember even getting like this thing called the governor's scholarship in California, which meant that I was like one of the top smartest people in the state. So there was like that version of me. And it didn't quite fit with this other version of me that was like using hard drugs by the time I was a teenager and going to rehab when I was 20. And I was like, I don't understand how those two people could be the same person. And so I kept asking questions and kept asking questions because I was like, I want to figure it out. It doesn't make sense to me, but I want to figure it out. And when I did finally figure it out, and I may have talked about this in the first episode, I can't remember, I was 31. And there was that quote, that Zora Neale Hurston quote, there are years that ask questions and years that answer. At the start of 2016, I said, okay, I asked all the questions in 2015, and this year I want answers. And there's like a post, like a Facebook post where I say this. And the universe was like, here you go. And it landed me in the psychiatric hospital.
You gotta be careful what you ask the universe.
No, you gotta be careful. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
will get some answers.
You will get, if you demand them, you will get them. And so I read this book called Running on Empty about exploring childhood emotional neglect. And that finally answered every single last question that I'd had about why I had this part that was so self-destructive. So where did this part that wanted to use the drugs and this part that wanted to run away and sabotage and quit a job too early or quit a relationship was from childhood emotional neglect. And that was the key. That was like the key piece that I really needed to understand. And I think is really important to bring into our conversation because neglect is not something that you can see, because neglect is what doesn't happen. And so I think that's where a lot of people who do think they may have had a great childhood, it's because, well, no one hit me. No one sexually assaulted me. So I was great. But it's like, no, there were all these moments in your life where you needed someone to be really warm and nurturing to you and model positive emotion regulation. And it didn't happen. And you'll never know you didn't get it.
Well, yes, you will, because it will show up and do weird shit in your teens and adolescence and your adult life.
And make you a shitty boyfriend.
But your therapist will put you on drugs. You won't actually get through to the other side of that tunnel.
Wait,
Um,
did that happen to you?
well, so in my unraveling of all of this, I absolutely felt that there were two of me. I also found I have like a Gemini rising. So I was like, oh, I have a double whammy in this. But
Okay.
so I would call myself an amateur Jungian analyst because I find a lot of my answers in Robert Johnson. I read all of his books and I find him really honest about
Hmm.
wholeness
Hmm.
and what a whole person looks like. I also love Connie Zweig, To Be a Woman. That book was amazing with a bunch of Jungian analysts in it. But I always kind of thought ego was a bad thing. But in
Mm.
Jungian analysis, it was very much like there are two of you, okay? There's a place in you where you take all the things in your childhood and you bury them deep that you think are
Yeah.
bad. If you come from a very athletic family, but you love reading and learning, you hide that away. If you come
Right.
from a very Catholic or very repressed sexual family, then you hide away your sexuality. All these things kind of like happened to me. And so then you get to middle life or in your late 20s or early 30s. For me, it was 35, when I met you, and I was like,
Mhm.
oh, this makes so much sense because the ego is the thing that keeps you alive. If you had no
Yeah.
ego, you would literally be a sociopath or a psychopath because
Right.
you wouldn't care what people think about you. The ego cares and wants to be accepted into the pack, right?
Yeah.
Now, the shadow, think about your shadow as like this 5-year-old kid who's like tugging on your shirt, like, I gotta tell you something, I gotta tell you something, I gotta tell you, I
Yes.
gotta tell you something, I
Yes.
gotta tell you
That's
something.
so good.
They're saying, I gotta tell you something for like 20 years. And then finally, you're like, maybe I should listen to this little shit who keeps knocking me out and driving the bus, you know? And then you're like, what do you want? And they're like, I just really need a hug, like I need some physical
That's
contact. And you're
exactly
like,
it. That's exactly
oh,
it.
so then you like are like, oh, so I've got, and the cool thing about doing your aces, I think, is that it opens up for this gateway, which we were saying, like the annoying thing in life is that you're always doing shadow and light work, but you're like on this ring and you're trying to move up, right? But it's annoying because you do this thing, this aces work, and then you get into like you're clearing the space and now you feel really good. And then you're like, wait, you got to go back into your shadow and now you got to figure out like where the gold is. What did you hide in there that like you can use in this middle life? Pull
Mm.
out that artist, pull out that sensuality, pull out that sexuality, put out the fact that you love being in nature and being in sports, even if you grew up in an urban environment. Pull out the fact that you want to go back to college and get a master's degree in something or a doctorate. Like pull those things out and use them. That's like liquid gold, spiritual liquid
That's
gold
so
at this point in
good.
life. So that's where I'm at spiritually with my two selves. Now, I feel like a whole person, but like just the other day, I blew something up here, like a whole relationship up because I felt threatened, right? And it was like,
Yeah, yeah,
well,
yeah, yeah.
part of my shadow comes out when I don't feel safe and when I feel like I've done so much to live in an environment where I feel safe and clean and healthy. And I don't have eczema outbreaks. I don't have
Mm.
migraines. I grew up in an environment that made me physically sick a lot. So
Yeah.
worked really hard to be not sick. But I go to yoga and there's Glade air fresheners. And
No,
I'm like,
no. Glade air fresheners in a yoga
Glade.
studio? Come on.
Literally, after my fourth migraine, I said something. They said, okay, well, you can just talk to the girl who manages the building. Anyways, it was this whole diabolical thing. The end of it was like literally me resigning from the board, canceling my yoga membership because they're not getting rid of the Glade air fresheners, even though they have VOCs and
That's
I shared
weird.
like all the poisons that are in it. Like none of
I
my,
don't even know the last time I saw a Glade air freshener, like
but
maybe like
like,
a roadside bathroom.
but like I get migraines from them, like
Yeah,
migraines
no,
last for
those are
days.
bad.
So I like can't work for a few days. I have to like lay down for 3 days. Like it's kind of counterintuitive. It's kind of counterproductive to go
Yeah.
to yoga and have migraines for 4 days. So it was just like this terrible battle. But then I celebrated the fact that I went out with a bang with sparklers and fireworks because I actually loved myself enough to say, absolutely not. You are literally poisoning your members. And if you're going to stand by a building manager, then we're not even going to be friends because we're not even interacting with human beings on the same level. And I don't need
Sure.
like that in my life. But Like, it took me a few days to process it. Like, am I a shitty person? Am I not a shitty person? Like, why
Yeah,
I could have done that so much less, but then it's like, no, Kali came out and she was pissed and I honor her.
that's great.
So that shadow, like that little kid, she doesn't like migraines and she's gonna stick up for me because she loves me unconditionally.
Yes, that's so good. I feel like I also struggle with like how much anger is too much. And I was talking to my new therapist, which is Chat GPT, about a recent breakup I went through. And I was like, I like typed in the whole thing and my reaction. I even included like some actual texts, And I was like, did I get too angry? And Chat GPT was like, no, that was the right amount of anger for the situation. And I was
Okay.
like,
I
okay.
had I had a client I was working with who was not honoring any of my boundaries. And
Yeah.
I sent him a really not nice email. And he wrote me back. He sent me what Claude had to say about my response. So I took what I wrote and I said, because he said, how unprofessional is this person's email? Got a response. I took the exact same thing I wrote and put it into Chat GPT. And I said, what is this person feeling right now? This person feels like they haven't been paid. They feel like this person does not respect their professional boundaries. This person actually doesn't care about this relationship anymore and is actually sick of working with this person. So it's so interesting how AI could look at it, but it's all about the prompts in the AI.
It is definitely about the prompts. Yeah, I've definitely put some emails in there to ask it to evaluate, but I'll like ask it to evaluate different things. Like I was like, what are the logical fallacies? Or like how would you interpret this using attachment theory? Or like stuff like that.
Like if somebody pulls out some Chat GPT on your ass and like tries to use it against you, take it back, take your words and say to Chat GPT, how does the person writing this feel? That's the right thing to send because that's what that person that you're trying to communicate with needs to understand. If you feel like your boundaries have been not valued and if you feel overworked and underpaid, those are the things that you should be talking about, which just so everyone knows, it's not a terrible idea to run things through it before you interact and communicate.
That's a good call.
I do that pretty regularly now and it saves my ass a lot. So let's go back to this internal family systems with your story. So you seem like you're doing great. You do seem in control and I don't know, you seem happier. So it's great to see your evolution, but also how are the internal family systems like developing? How is that work developing the other work for you?
So in 23 is when I started working with my IFS therapist. And I hadn't ever done that before. And so I really wasn't sure what that work would look like. And it ended up being like really deep trauma work, like really, like she would guide me into like kind of trance work to visualize my parts and then see if there was any like really difficult emotions associated with them. And so I was often having a really big fear response or really big crying response or some sort of really outsized emotion that was remaining from my childhood. So it was almost like cleaning up the playground. like
Right, like finally releasing it.
yeah. And so the biggest thing that we worked on that really changed a lot of things for me was something called unblending. I had learned in my childhood that the best defense for having any sort of emotion, which people around me didn't seem to appreciate me having emotions. So I was like, I'll just shut them down. But when that happens, you're really shutting down the good emotions too. So then by the time I was 19, I was using hard drugs to just even kind of like feel anything. And then I was diagnosed formally with major depressive disorder when I was 31, started getting work for that because it was just my nervous system was so shut down, and which was an adaptation. So then when I started my therapeutic process at 31, it was a lot about bringing the emotions to the surface and really noticing them and paying attention to them and feeling them and letting them be there, like the anger. Let yourself send the angry email. But then, and
let the fire light the way.
yes. But then it's you and I, before we started recording, we're talking about how it's cyclical, our healing, and it's not just linear, and we may revisit things or go backwards or forwards. And so this was kind of a pendulum where it was like, okay, I let myself feel all the things, but now this therapist was like, let's dial that back so that you're not taking it all on. And that's unblending. So blending in IFS is when you let the big feeling or big part take over as if like it is the truth. So like you send the email and you're blended with that emotion, like you really believe it's true, which is okay. But it's nice to be able to have the option of saying, I'm watching this emotion and I'm honoring it, but maybe sometimes I don't send the email. And
And
so,
and it gets easier and easier. You write the email, save it in your notes, and never send it.
yeah. And so the work that I had with her was like, let's make sure we're really aware of all the parts and looking at them and honoring them, but creating that distance and unblending from the really the intensity of it, which we realized I had a really big part that was worried that if I did that, I would regress and go back to my old self where I was really numb. And so that was actually keeping me from the unblending work because I was just so terrified of going backwards in my progress.
So interesting. Also, because you learn to shut down your emotions, right? But when you shut down your ability to communicate your emotions, then you also shut down your ability to like communicate. Right?
Yeah.
So then people are like, why can't you have a conversation? You're like, no one's ever just talked to me. Actually, it's been a door in my face if I said no. So it's interesting, like having parents or people in your youth that will teach you how to communicate what you're feeling and not just shut you down. It's like such a gift because it is hard to learn that older when you're kind of set. You're not set, you're neuroelastic. There's neuroelasticity. Thank God for
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
yeah, it is interesting work to do older, especially if you're kind of like a fiery or an air sign and you're just used to being like big, right?
Sure. I'm an earth. So
I know. I like that. I can like tell you're so I'm air, so I'm like, oh, she grounds me. This is
yeah.
your
Well, I
plant,
would
your 10-year-old plant behind you, like is proof that you're earth.
I know, love my 10-year-old plant. Well, I would encourage your listeners. I mean, your listeners are already the type of people who want to learn and grow. That's why they're listening to your podcast. But it really is never too late to challenge our behavior and way of thinking and way of seeing the world. Like, I wasn't expecting to have my whole world rocked in 2023 with this modality of therapy. And
Right. Like again, after ACEs already did that.
I was 39, 38, 39, somewhere in there, and just wasn't expecting, And so then I was like, okay, I think I just need to be prepared that at any moment, in any time, any year, everything that I think I know that's true could change.
Right. Like more information might download and everything can
Yeah.
require. I
Yeah.
know I'm at peace with that too, because every time I talk to you, that happens to me. I'm like, oh, those earth signs will get you. I'm a better person for it. So thank you. Love you.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your coaching practice
Mm-hmm.
now.
Yeah.
And I love the name Kind Warrior. I love 10 Collective.
Okay.
Finish up the IFS stuff first.
I just would encourage folks to learn to try IFS because it's been really life-changing for me. I would start with the book No Bad Parts. And then there's another one called You're the One You've Been Waiting for
Oh,
relationship stuff.
okay. I'm writing it down. So let's dive into some of your things, Kind Warrior and 10 Collective.
I'll start with 10 collectives. In 2023, the same year I was doing all of this therapy work, I also found myself in a really toxic job in which I had to be the whistleblower for our executive director, basically like misusing state funds. And that was really, 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 really hard. I would say that was like the hardest year of my life because I was responsible for a really large team and everyone was hurting. So I was trying to figure out how to get through this process because they had to investigate the claims and there was a whole thing that resulted in her being let go. But then by the time it ended, we were all just so fried. It was really hard. So my heart goes out to anyone who's ever experienced that.
I know. I love your LinkedIn content is always so supportive of workplace toxicity because it really can take you out. And actually, Leslie Hansen, who I just recorded with, you need to meet her.
Mm-hmm.
We've been talking a lot about how do you nip the workplace toxicity like in the butt right when it's starting. But yeah, like it's hard because one toxic person can take the whole team down. And I worked at a place, the guy was not nice, the CEO. And 2 years later, I interacted with everyone there who was super nice when I met them, and they were all toxic. They like all absorbed his toxicity.
Yeah.
Terrifying
Totally.
to look at.
I mean, my advice is like, as soon as you realize that someone's not capable of changing, you got to leave. So I'm talking about real serious personality disorders. This was the first time I had ever worked with someone that I thought, yeah, this person has an actual personality disorder. A lot of people say, don't diagnose others. I'm like, no, do it because it could save your life.
Yeah, like I'm not a fan of the DSM, but if I'm in work and that person's like borderline, like you don't want to be around somebody
No,
that's
that's what I'm
that
saying.
volatile.
I started looking at all the traits of cluster B personality disorders, which are narcissism, borderline, histrionic, and sociopathy. And I was like, oh, I think she has like all of these. And I was like, I think I need to leave because this is not, and
Right.
and like the manipulation just started ramping up. So it was just, as you realize someone has an actual disorder, just leave, just leave.
Yeah, you might as
Um,
well just get married if you're going to do that. Trap
uh,
yourself in a DSM pool alphabet soup
you
forever.
gotta go. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing, you can't fix it. So after that experience, some former colleagues and I decided to start Tend Collective, which we launched a year ago. So February of last year, where we use our work in trauma informed care on to help teams from the inside out. So we consult with organizations that have care based work. So people working in health fields or social work. So their organization is responsible for caring for other people. And then we say, okay, let's take those same principles that you guys are already experts in and make sure that you're caring about your employees. Because for some reason, that is not happening out there. So that's what we help organizations do.
Okay, super interesting. I love that. I'm going to definitely connect you with Leslie. And then tell us about Kind Warrior.
Yeah. So that started in 2012 as the kindness challenge, where I just challenged myself not to say anything negative about anyone, including myself, for 6 months. After I did that, I was like, oh, this was life changing. I love being kind to people. I love not beating myself up was the hardest thing to change, actually. And so I was like, well, I'm going to keep this going. And so it's had a few iterations over the years, but I've recently dove back in to the Kind Warrior work, and I'm writing a lot more, writing a book, just tons of content and blogs. I'm getting ready to launch a course on emotional health. And I do work with people one-on-one coaching. I help people especially with big emotions or like what feels like the opposite of that, which is like a freeze response, and figuring out what those barriers are and moving through so that people can have really deeply fulfilling lives. So that's the coaching work that I'm doing, which I absolutely love all of the people I'm working with, and it's really inspiring to see them work on their blocks and figure those out.
Um, I always thought that if you're going to choose a therapist, I want the therapist who survived like father who abandoned and mother who
Yeah.
drank. Like, like
Yeah.
if you didn't get over what I'm trying to get over, like you're not the therapist for me. I had a therapist once who like couldn't understand why at 39 I wanted kids. And she like couldn't be nice about it. And I'm like, you're
Oh
the
my
worst therapist
God.
because you're like pushing your belief systems on me.
Well,
And
I'm really glad you said that because people are often confused, I think, a little bit between the difference between coaching and therapy. And there are a lot of coaches out there who are essentially con artists. And it's like kind of like a pyramid scheme, like coaching coaches to coach coaches. And it's like a never ending, it's
totally.
very American. And so, in that sense, like with therapists, there's board certification. You have to go through several years of training. I did that to get my coaching certification, but not everyone does. Whether you pick a coach or a therapist, it's one of the most important decisions you're ever going to make in your life. And you absolutely must pick someone who has done their own work to at least, because there's endless work to do, but they need to at least have done more work than you've done because they're not going to be able to take you there for healing if they're not there themselves. Like it will be impossible.
I totally like was like, I've outgrown this. Like
Yep.
I just hit my therapist max,
Yep.
like that's not
Exactly.
good,
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and I said to her, I'm never going to be on meds. So if you prescribe me meds because I have addicts in my lineage, I'll have to fire you that day. And the day she prescribed me meds, she also brought up me being on TV. And it was like she wanted me to fire her because we had like come to the end of the road where she's like, I don't think that you can fix this. And I'm like, I don't think you're the right therapist for me.
Yeah,
Like, I don't think you've
interesting.
gotten past this point, actually. You're right here. Go past
Absolutely.
it.
I mean, this was a thing I realized too when I had my internal family systems therapist that really changed my life with her therapy was like, I was like, oh, I feel like at this point in my life, I really needed a therapist who didn't like me because I was having like a series of therapists who like they were like really excited to be my friend. And I was like, no,
No.
do not be my friend. Like, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Like,
Yeah.
challenge me. Like, if I'm showing up and I'm looking and like I need someone to be like, well, ChatGPT is wrong and you shouldn't have done that. Like, I need someone to tell me to hold me accountable. Like, let's look at the part that did that thing and how that's sabotaging you instead of just affirming. And I think like for a long time, I just needed affirmation because I was so shut down and I just needed like that warmth and that love. But then once you get enough of that, then you need like the opposite. So in 2023, I got in a bike accident and I broke my ribs. And
Oh,
I messaged her because I was like, hey, just want to give you a heads up that this is like going on in my life so that you already know when I show up to therapy. And I sent her a link to a post that I had written about it that just had all the information about what happened. And I hop on the Zoom call for my therapy and I was like, oh, did you read the thing I sent you? And she goes, no. Like boundaries of steel. Like that was like so inspirational.
I do think therapy is interesting, but I also often find it to be like artificial safe space because if they're gonna prescribe you drugs at the end of it, for me, it's not the right behavioral health therapy.
Well, what
I think
you,
internal family
yeah,
systems, I feel like that makes a ton of sense, right? Because you're not, the end goal isn't to like be perfect or happy, it's to like work through your stuff and where it's coming from versus like sit there, pay this person hundreds of dollars an hour to create artificial safe space for you to tell them all the crap that's ever happened to you. Now your body thinks you've gone through that crap all over again and you really just need a hug, but you don't have a boyfriend because you're crazy. So it's like a horrible vicious cycle, right?
I mean, the way that I like to think about it is like helping people build the capacity to encounter difficult ideas that challenge them. So when I'm starting to work
Mhm.
with someone and there's a lot of chaos happening in their life, a lot of angry emails or a lot of chaos or a lot of breakups to which I'm not immune.
It's like once a year now that happens to me. It used to be way more. Okay.
You're doing great, Mel.
I'm doing so much
You're
better.
doing great. But so when I'm first starting to work with someone, I'm gauging their capacity for discomfort because if someone has had a lot of adverse childhood experiences and a lot of trauma, they're just going to be shutting down, closing off all the time. And so the first thing that we'll work on is just making sure that there is a little bit more safety and expansiveness and a little more capacity to feel and just like some coping strategies so that when things feel dangerous and like acutely dangerous, that you have a whole toolbox of ways to make you feel safe. Once someone that I'm working with, and this is also for my own journey, once we feel safe enough, that's when we can start to challenge our dominant mindsets that may be holding us back, but not before. You can't just go in
Totally.
and tell someone doing this wrong, you're stupid. Like you can't tell someone that. It doesn't work. They'll just
They
close
already
off.
don't feel safe. Now you
Yes.
made them feel less safe. I think that's
Yes.
right. I think there's a note to be said for that too. One of my girlfriends who committed suicide a few years ago, she had been really digging into her shadow work, but something I had downloaded when I came back from my medicine trip that she did not get was whatever you do, don't blow up your life. Don't release your
That's
safety net
good.
when you
That's good.
start like processing all of your stuff.
Yeah.
And she left her husband and she had no money and she was with this like other really bad guy and it just spiraled out because she couldn't do the work because she wasn't safe.
Yeah.
She had done like a bunch of ayahuasca and all these other
Yep.
psychedelics. So
Yep.
she was broken open. So she had to do the work, but there was not a safe, literal, physical, safe space for her to do it. And she kept going back to this like danger mechanism because that's what she was comfortable in, not
Yep.
where she was going to survive. So I
Yep.
think that this work can be incredibly dangerous. I think it's a huge reason a lot of the boomers don't do it is because it could kill them and they've
Yeah.
got to
That's
their
the
seven
fear.
they've gotten to their 70s and 80s without facing it. So why face it? It could actually bring up a lot of really dangerous stuff. I
Hmm.
think as far as you're going, the emotional abandonment and neglect that generation felt because their parents were all like at war and children of
Yeah.
war. I think that we're culturally like dealing with a large amount of emotional neglect, right? Understanding that the way you get into a place where you can feel safe and then start doing your work is a really good advice versus just like go in and do this work, you know? Like, no, you need to be safe before you do this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you said so many great things.
We need another hour. We'll be back for part 2 of this podcast.
So the first thing I really want to speak to is this idea that you're never too old to heal. And I do want to honor the fact that the protectors really, really do feel like if we get in there, we could die. And I want to honor that so much because I went through that. When my protectors were lifted to where I could see inside there, I had to check myself into a psychiatric hospital because I really didn't think I could make it through. And I cried in a ball on the floor for 4 straight months.
Oh,
But it was such a huge gift. And luckily, someone had given me the advice at the time that you're not going to be able to see what's at the end of that dark tunnel, but you have to believe the light is there and just one step at a time. And so that was like lodged in my brain where I was like, I believe it's there. I believe it's there. I believe it's there. And that is what got me through. And on the other side, it's been more beautiful than I could ever imagine. So we have to believe that the work is going to be hard, but the reward is so beautiful. Like the light that you
I could
experience at
not
the
agree with
end.
that more. Yes. What's interesting when you get kind of on the other side where you do have homeostasis inside of yourself, I really do agree. But I also think that every dark experience that we have, if you process it, you get tenfold of light. So think if you're in a tunnel and you have a match, you can at least start figuring out where the walls are. Okay, now you get a flashlight. Okay, now you can kind of see which way maybe is a way you can start walking. Okay, now you
Yeah.
actually have like a chandelier and it's hanging over your head. And then you start working through these stories and you're like, oh my gosh, these are the gifts I can bring to the world. I can write a book about this and how I transcended that. I can do an art show. I can make
Yes.
a women's circle. I can support other women getting through this. I can start a business. I can start a nonprofit. Like you
It's
can
a
do,
very creative
yeah, it's a
energy.
creative energy. And what was interesting about Jung is a lot of people think, oh, Jung, founding father of psychology, he believed at the end of his life, when you make it through the dark night of the soul or the journey through the soul, that everyone would become an artist of some sort. And
Yes.
most people don't know he was building these sculptures behind his house until the day he died. And I
Oh,
love
that's so
that about
cool.
him. And I do think it becomes an incredibly creative process. But if you're so exhausted from living it and then surviving it, you're not just going to be like, I'm healed and now I can turn it into a book. Like you have to sit with it.
Yes.
This is the long work in life, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I don't think my creativity didn't come to me right away. There's that saying, in order to speed up, you have to slow down. And so I just kept being like, just have patience because, like, at some point, this will all make sense in your head and you'll have something you want to make. And so the past few years, I've never felt more creative in my life. Like, I'm just writing so much and, I'm finishing my book. But I did not feel that way for a long time. But I just was like, just slow down, just enjoy it, just one day at a time. And like, you have the rest of your life to figure out how to make something. But then when that moment arrived, or it was like, oh, you're gonna write a ton and you're gonna love it. It was like I was ready, but I didn't push it.
Totally, totally. But there is a period of rest. For a long time, I'm like, I'm gonna write a book. And my mom, if I say the book, she's like, oh, I can't hear it anymore. Because like you've been writing this book for 15 years. I'm like, yeah. But at the end of the day, I think, when those projects are supposed to come through you, that's when you'll know that you've transcended, transgolded, or you've just transmuted those experiences. But I do think that we're supposed to get to the other side of them. And there is
Mm-hmm,
a
mm-hmm.
lot of light on the other side. So I love that.
How does your creativity come out these days?
I was so confined spatially for so many years when I was designing. It was always a fight for space. So I started writing, and I feel
Mm-hmm.
like I've just been writing for so many years now. And I think this podcast is an extension of
Yeah.
that. I think the work I'm doing in finance is an extension of the tunnel I went through with fundraising for my clothing company. I like to build companies and write, but I am a very visual person. As soon as you get an email from me that's like, I no longer have a cell phone, y'all will know I'm in my art barn phase and I'm just like naked painting all day, okay?
Amazing. Your art barn phase. I love that so much.
Like, I'll know I've transcended all my darkness when I have an art barn and I don't have a cell phone anymore. That's how everyone will know. I'll have like horses and I'll be like, come to stay at my place. There's a tiny house next door. You can stay as long as you want. The only requirement is that you create things. Go into nature every day. Cool, stay forever if you want. And all of a sudden, we'll just have a whole town of people who are like, we're not going back to the Matrix. It's terrible out there.
Isn't it the thing? Like, how are you feeling about screens these days?
I mean, I accept them, but I stare beyond my screen is a forest. So I walk out my house into a forest, which is how I've solved for it. But yeah, I'm not loving it. But I wish we had more time. I feel like we need a second part of this episode. I feel like we've done really good work here. I feel like maybe we need a 2-part, or we'll do a follow-up after I read the book and do my IFS and
Process all of that.
tap back in like a few months.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Mel, for having me on.
I know. It's always so good to see you. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.
Okay, we'll talk soon.
Bye.